He wants to leave the Nets because he wants to go back to being the bus rider, as Charles Barkley would say. He is done being the decision maker. That's what Kevin Durant was the last 3 years in Brooklyn. He was the decision maker. He made the calls on everything. He was the one who decided to bring Kyrie Irving to town and partner up with him when he left the Warriors to go to the Nets. He had also decided midway through year number 1, when remember, he wasn't playing. He was out the entire year rehabbing his Achilles injury. He decided midway through the year, you know what, when I do return, I don't want to play under Kenny Atkinson. He's not the kind of guy that I think should be my coach. Boom, Kenny, you're fired. He was fired. He brought in Steve Nash. Handpicked Steve Nash, who had virtually no coaching experience whatsoever. So said, you know what, that's my guy. Bring him in. He was hired. When there was a chance or there was a thought, oh, maybe the Nets could acquire James Harden. James Harden wants out of Houston. It's either the Sixers or it's the Nets. KD okayed and eventually helped make the deal to get James Harden to Brooklyn to form the Big Three, to have these scary hours, as James Harden would say, form in Brooklyn. Guess what? As we know, that didn't work out. And basically a year later, when James Harden wanted out, Kevin Durant said, okay, fine. You want to send him to Philly? We'll get Ben Simmons back. I okay that as well. Kevin Durant has made every single decision along the way, and every single decision Kevin Durant has made the last 3 years have only driven the Nets further away from title contention. And I think now after 3 years of the Nets listening to whatever he wanted and having to make the call on almost every single move, coaching-wise, player-wise, he's done. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He wants to go back to being the bus rider. He is done being the bus driver. And frankly, it's pathetic. For a player of his caliber, for being a star player in the NBA, his leadership skills or lack thereof are the biggest reason why right now the Nets are a mess, why they're not title contenders, and why Kevin Durant wants to run away from the Nets and go somewhere else. And the reason why I can conclude Kevin Durant is done being the main guy, wants to go back to a similar role he was widely criticized for 3 years in Golden State, and that was cheating and basically going to a super team and having, not being able to do it on his own. Remember, we all criticized. He got a lot of attention, a lot of bad press for going to the Warriors. I think it's easy to deduce he left the Warriors and went to the Nets because he said, you know what, it's time for me to do it on my own. But now Kevin Durant's mindset has shifted. Now he said, you know what, I had a taste of what it's like to be Steph Curry, making the decisions. I now know what it's like to walk in LeBron James' shoes, where it's not just about playing, it's basically being the player and the GM. Kevin Durant is done. He wants to go back to being the bus rider. And here's why we can make that assumption. Look at the teams Kevin Durant is reportedly interested in playing for. There's a select few. He's not down to go anywhere but Brooklyn. It's not one of those, get me out of town. I don't care if it's Sacramento. I don't care if it's Indiana. I'll go anywhere but here. He has a select few teams he wants to be traded to. The Celtics. But as SNY's Ian Begley reported earlier this week, he wants to play with the Celtics, but he also wants to play with the Celtics with Marcus Smart, specifically. He wants Marcus Smart there. He's also reportedly interested in playing for the Sixers. He wants Embiid there. He wants James Harden there. He's down for a reunion with the beard. He wants to again play with a guy who ditched him 6 months ago. Left him at the altar in James Harden. He also, earlier this offseason, when the first reports came out in late June that Kevin Durant wants to trade, one of the first teams named, the Miami Heat. And Kevin Durant said, I'll go play with the Heat, but I want Jimmy Butler there. I want Bam Adebayo there. He also mentioned the Suns, but he said, I want Devin Booker there. I want CP3 there. Those names and those teams are specific. Because guess what? All of those teams he would be traded to, the Celtics, the Sixers, the Heat, the Suns. He's not going there to be the guy like he was in Brooklyn. He's not going there to take control of the organization and have himself be the decision maker like he was in Brooklyn. He is going to those teams. He is targeting those teams because he wants to, again, regain the role he had in Golden State. Just play basketball.